So we're reading the Silmarillion Chapter 12 of Men, which is a very short chapter about the awakening of men, which is good because what's happened inevitably is that as I've continued on with my read through of the Silmarillion, the first 8 or 9 videos I put out were my reactions from in the context that I'd never read the Silmarillion before. But from now on, I'm rereading them with eyes that have read the whole Silmarillion. So it's a completely different take and I'm picking up on things I didn't need to pick up before. But of course what's happened is I've started reading from chapter 10 or 11, where I'd stopped doing videos previously, because previously I just read so much of the Silmarillion so quickly that I was like, I'm not making videos, I want to read the next chapter. But now I can't just pick it up halfway through the book because I'm like, no, I need to go back to the beginning and read it again. It's so weird to go from halfway through or a third of the way through, wherever we are. And so that is what has happened, is that I've gone and read a whole bunch of everything that I've already read. And there's so much that I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to have to just shelve it for now and leave it for another time, or as it comes up later. Because today we are talking about men. It's really interesting, I guess, with the emotional reaction that you get to men and mortals in the Silmarillion. I wonder if any of you have had the same reaction. I almost get like a negative vibe, not negative, but like as if they are the dirty second comers walking their muddy feet all over this beautiful world that the elves are filling with gorgeous art pieces that will last for thousands of years. And now there's men, and the way that it's set up as the second comers kind of makes it like I'm having a reaction like, go away, men, like let's just let the elves be, they would just leave it. Anyway, the sun has risen. The mortal sun has risen. I'm still obsessed with my metaphor of the sun representing men and the moon representing elves. And the sun is mortal, technically. It will expire and burn itself out, whereas the moon is pretty much immortal. It's just a chunk of rock that's not really breaking down at all. But it will expire the moment that the sun explodes, because the sun will explode out and encapsulate like half the solar system in its explosion. And taking the elves with it. Men will bring the elves with them when they finally burn out, when Arda is finished, when it is the end. Anyway, I do want to talk about that in a minute, but I should actually get to the chapter. Most in mind, Ulmo kept the exiles who gathered news of the earth through all waters. This is basically like the sun and moon have risen and the Noldor are making their way to Beleriand, or some of them are already there, and the Valar are now peacefully behind their protected mountains in the west. And Ulmo, it is specified here that Ulmo is keeping the exiles in mind, and through his massive water network, all of his veins, he can bring news back. Whether or not he brings all of that news back to Manwë, I don't know. Like, I feel like he keeps probably a lot of it to himself. I do remember that he was against, and this is back on page 42, though I don't think many people have the same page numbers as me. Okay, no, it's page 41, actually. The Valar, this is back when the Valar were debating and wanting to get the elves from Cuiviénen back over to Valinor in the first place. The Valar were gathered in council and they were divided in debate. So that tells me that there were quite a few of them who were like, no, just let them be free. But specifically, Ulmo was the chief, held that the Quendi should be left free to walk as they would in Middle-earth, and with their gifts of skill to order all the lands and heal their hurts. Left free to walk as they would, with their gifts of skill to order all the lands. I mean, I just agree with Ulmo. Why were the elves brought all the way over to Valinor? We're not talking about that today though. The point is that Ulmo's keeping an eye on everyone. And what happens is that, this is one of my favourite lines at the moment in the Silmarillion, is this. In that time, the air of Middle-earth became heavy with the burden of growth and mortality. Heavy with the burden of growth and mortality. Like, it's a burden to now have all this new fresh growth because it's also mortal and it's gonna rot and decay. It goes on to say, and the changing and aging of all things was hastened exceedingly. Life teemed upon the soil and in the waters in the second spring of Arda. And the Eldar increased, and beneath the new sun, Beleriand grew green and fair. So this is now what is called the second spring of Arda. I tried to look up where the first spring of Arda was, and I haven't been able to find it mentioned anywhere, but I assume that the first spring of Arda was before the lamps were torn down. And now we have the sun and the moon in the sky, so it is now another spring. The fact that we've got the lines about we now have years that are really quick and everything's growing green and fair. I'm assuming that we now have seasons like winter and summer and spring and autumn. And we must, because I know that there are seasons written somewhere else that I've read somewhere. Now I don't know where, but I know that there are seasons. So this is when seasons begin. The earth is tilting. It's now round. It must be tilting as it's spinning around on its axis. I don't know. But I'm just obsessed with the line that the earth is becoming heavy with the burden of growth and mortality, like, but also beautifully heavy with the burden of growth and mortality. And then we have men awaking over east. And I remember on my first read through of the Silmarillion, I got to like the part of men coming through and all their family trees, and all of my bandwidth had been taken up with memorizing and trying to get my head around the family trees of the elves, that I got to men and I was like, I can't start from scratch again. What are you doing? So hopefully this time I'm reading through, I can actually get my head around it, because I kind of got lost in the section about men and then got confused. Also of note that like during this time, the Eldar increased. So that is suggesting that just as men are awakening, elves are still actually reproducing a lot. Like, they're getting it on. Essentially, this is a good time, a nice time. I mean, I'm assuming they mean the Eldar increase in population, unless they're saying increase in spirit, which it could be, but I'm assuming he means that increasing in population. So a couple of interesting things about men that are different to the elves that I enjoyed. The first was that they woke up alone and no one was there to guide them. Also, luckily, they woke up without Melkor roaming around, although there still would have been evil things that would have killed them roaming around, but they woke up and kind of just had the world laid out for them to do what they wanted. Like, kind of forging their own independent pathway. And it made me kind of think that the earth, or Arda, has been created for men, for the second children, and the first children it wasn't created for, but they're a part of it. Kind of like the earth was made for men to walk upon it, and elves were like made to be a part of the beauty of the world. It's not even like they're opposites. I don't even think we could ever get opposites when comparing men and elves in this world. It's just that they have maybe different kind of positions. It's almost like the elves are going to be there to the end, to the very end. So they're like the watchers, the observers, the storytellers, whereas men are the people creating the story, the protagonists. That's what it feels like when I read this. There's a funny line before I get to the second point I want to make about men waking up, where it says, Morgoth had then not long come back to Middle-earth, and his power went not far abroad, and was moreover checked by the sudden coming of great light. It was like Morgoth got to Middle-earth, the sun rose, and he was like, Jesus, what the hell was that? And he probably spent like the first 100 years of the sun being risen just being like hoping it will go away. I'm like, it can't stay in the sky forever. And then gradually resigning himself to the fact that the sun is going to stay in the sky. He was very unhappy about it. It took a long time for him to adjust to it. They didn't have sunglasses back then. And I really enjoy how Ulmo took thought for men. Ulmo tried to send messages to men like he had been sending messages to a lot of elves, but the men were kind of clueless and didn't really know what they were looking for, so didn't really get the messages. It's kind of funny. The second point I wanted to make about the cool thing about men awakening is it says here that, you know, they literally awoke with the rise of the sun, the first rise of the sun, and the opening eyes of men were turned towards it, and their feet, as they wandered over the earth, for the most part strayed that way, i.e. to the west where the sun rose, because it says here also, men spread and wondered, and their joy was the joy of the morning, before the dew is dry, when every leaf is green. Okay, there are two things I want to say about this, and that is, the first one is, if you are a morning person, you completely understand that feeling of being awake before the dew is dry on grass, and that special quietness and promise that a new day holds in a moment where nothing yet is loud and bustling, and it feels like the day stretches before you like some big horizon. And that is the vibe I get of men as they awaken, and also the vibe of their entire culture, our entire culture. The second thing is, yeah, that looking into the west, into the horizon. The coolest thing about this is that is the horizon thing, right? I was listening to, there's a poet called David White who wrote a mini essay about horizons, which I can't remember much. I'll try and find some in a minute. But one of the things that always stuck with me that he said, and this may have actually been in a talk that he did elsewhere, was that our ancestors as humans were born to horizons. Whereas right now, we have 4 walls surrounding us and a roof that stop us from seeing horizons like all the time. Buildings in the distance, things that block the way. Whereas the men who awoke over in the east, somewhere in Middle-earth, and our ancestors basically they would roll over in the morning and see a horizon. And all day long, they would see horizons. There were no walls that blocked the horizons. They would see, and horizons are most beautiful and most colourful, of course, during dawn and dusk, which is only possible because of the sun. So horizons are such a big part of the awakening of men compared to elves, who, there would have been horizons, but it never would have had that beautiful pink glow or pink salmon orange glow that you get at dusk and dawn, because there was never any light that could catch there and refract through the air and split off different colours. You know, there was never a blue sky either as a backdrop. It was, they would have had really bleary horizons. Not only that, but horizons to men would have been seen as very mysterious. Like, I know I'm taking this metaphor really far, but just bear with me. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about this. Oh, and before I go on, I do actually have a quote from David White regarding horizons. He says here, "Horizons mark the threshold between the world that I inhabit and the one that seems to wait for me, between a world I can almost understand and what lies beyond the imagination of my present life. Horizons are creative, disturbing, invitational edges, just by the fact that they exist." So that's a quote from David White, and I really like that because it gets the vibe of what I'm trying to say, is that men woke up with horizons being beautiful and walked into the horizon of the West. And I think men as a culture, like humans as a culture, we are so built around walking to horizons. Metaphorically speaking, I say, we always are thinking of like that next thing in the future, looking towards this imaginative future that we want to have and hold and live, and always walking towards it. It always seems like the horizon is always still there. Like there's always something more that we can do. There's always more things to discover. It's like we never quite arrive at the horizon. It's always there. It's like trying to get to the end of a rainbow. So you're never going to get there. And even more so, horizons are mysterious to men and alluring because men's eyes, compared to elves, aren't very good at seeing in the distance. I mean, we can certainly see in the distance a long way, but it does get blurry and then we can't see very far. Whereas elves' eyes seems to be able to see quite clearly and pierce through a large distance, which means that horizons for them probably aren't quite as beautiful because they're seeing all this detail and not this big, beautiful picture that men would see because, you know, we're not able to see that far. So it just kind of all blurs into this one big mysterious promise. And so I think horizons for men must be so much more beautiful than they are for elves, because there is that blurred mystery that we want to walk towards. And I remember talking to one of my friends who is an artist, talking about how you create foreground and then hindground, how you create distance in a painting. And what he said was that essentially you obviously make things, the further things are away in a picture, you make them smaller, obviously, perspective, but not only that, you also make them blurrier in general. And then things in the foreground, you want to make sure that they are bigger, but also have more clarity, because that's how we see as humans. Things that are closer do have a lot more clarity than things that are further, just by virtue of sun splitting around, but also if you're like me, and short-sightedness and having a little bit of an astigmatism, then sure, like things in the distance, the further away, the more blurry they are. And I really love that because it's, once again, that just has that same feeling of something in the distance being blurry. Men's eyes, the further that they looked, things were blurry. So of course they were going to go towards that. And I think this really defines the passion of men always striving towards something more, something greater, something they might never have, but will always strive towards it. And that is the driving wheel that turns inside men, that I don't think elves have the same force in them. Because, like, of course, the further something away is and the more mysterious it is and the more promise it holds that you want to uncover, you're going to walk towards that, right? And that's exactly what men did. Okay, that was a massive tangent. But yeah, I've really been obsessed with horizons and men. It's just such a great metaphor. Like, the sun rose as they woke. I mean, come on. There's a really depressing line here. But the dawn is brief and the day full often belies its promise. Yes, we know that. That's why dawn is so peaceful and nice before the day has struck us across the head. And now the time drew on to the great wars of the powers of the north. So men find their way west and start mingling. Although we don't get really to men being discovered much in this chapter. We go back to the elves a little bit. Tolkien reminds us that actually only a very small part of the fate of mortals is told here, as most of what is said is of the Noldor and the Silmarils. And really only the mortals that became entangled in the fate of the Silmarils, their story was told. Interestingly, in those days, elves and men were of like stature and strength of body, but the elves had greater wisdom and skill and beauty, and those who had dwelt in Valinor and looked upon the powers even surpassed the beauty of the dark elves. It's just so depressing. It's like Tolkien's like, well, back in the day, men were pretty much as tall and strong and fit as all the elves. But But just to remind you, the elves were like way more beautiful, better at everything, and smarter. Like, thanks. And not only that, they were just the dark elves. The elves in Valinor were way better. Oh man. So men can't even really compare to Morroquendi. And then since then, that's because that's back in those days, men then became less in stature than the elves. And also lost years of life expectancy. We know that. But we also know that the elves would have lost a lot of their power as well. So maybe they both declined at the same time, kind of thing. Yeah, men were more frail, more easily slain by weapon or mischance. Mischance, I know, right? Like just a cut to your finger that gets infected. And less easily healed. So that the elves even healed better? Subject to sickness and many ills, and if that didn't kill them, they grew old and died. Wow. Now we get to the part about what happens to men after their death. And this is very, very interesting to me because it kind of goes into... So it says here, what may befall their spirits after death, the elves know not. Some say they go to the halls of Mandos, but their place of waiting there is not that the elves and Mandos under Iluvatar alone, save Manwë, knows where they go. So hang on. Their place of waiting there is not that the elves and Mandos alone, save Manwë, knows where they go after the time of recollection in those silent halls beside the outer sea. So wait, Manwë knows where they go, but Mandos and the elves don't? Am I reading that correctly? This is the second last paragraph of Men. So Manwë knows what happens to the second children after they die and they leave Mandos's halls. There's another statement here that says, the fate of men after death, maybe, is not in the hands of the Valar, nor was all foretold in the music of the Ainur. But Manwë still knows. This is really interesting. So basically, I think this is where we're getting to the point where Tolkien doesn't explicitly actually want to explain the fate of where men go to when they die, because it's maybe a reflection of his own beliefs that regarding heaven. Maybe that's a thread coming through here. The fact that even in the music of the Ainur, in all those harmonies that were created, none of those harmonies explained where men went, means that it's something purely that Iluvatar has created and not any of the Ainur's music. So, but Manwë knows? If we go back to, I think it's Valaquenta or Noob. If we go back to the last page of chapter 1 of the Beginning of Days, it says here, it is one with this gift of freedom that the children of men dwell only a short space in the world alive, and are not bound to it, and depart soon, whither the elves know not. For the elves die not till the world dies, unless they are slain or waste in grief. Neither do they age. So this is what I was saying at the beginning of the video. Essentially, like, it seems to me that elves are a part of the flora and fauna of the world upon which is made for men. Which is not, that is too reductive, far too reductive, but that's like, I'm just going to say that as like a basic statement as to like the vibe that I'm getting from this. And men have that gift of being free and doing what they want to shape the world. Oh man, I'm not going to get into this. We'll get into this maybe when we go back to Finrod and his chat with, what's her name? Haleth? Like it says here, the Quendi wandered in lonely places and took to the moonlight and the starlight and to the woods and the caves, becoming as shadows and memories. save those who went to the west. So the elves that stayed not in Valinor and stayed in Middle-earth, their Fëa, I guess, kind of began to separate from the physical grounding it had, and perhaps they felt, I need to get my thoughts into order about this. It feels like there's logic to this, and I just need to somehow figure out how to enunciate it and get it into some sort of order in my head. It's almost as if, like, as the elves age and they become more shadow and spirit, they have less capability to actually change in Arda, and more, they're sort of forced more into this observer role, into just being a part of the world and being the way the world thinks about itself. Like, I don't know who the physicist was who was talking about how we, as with conscious thought, are the way the universe thinks about itself. It's almost like elves are the way that Arda thinks and observes and learns. And men just come in like a bull in a china shop. There was one other interesting point that I was reading about men, and that was this. So it says here that men usurped the sunlight as the elves waned and faded. Men usurped the sunlight. Like, men became brighter than the sun. Like, that's just crazy. It almost suggests that men are going to survive the death of Arda, because when eventually this planet is destroyed by the sun's explosion, we've figured out how to create a space colony and have well left this solar system, hence usurping the sunlight. It's like almost like that is the suggestion, like men will continue to live on, but elves will be destroyed. There's a note here actually about Manwë. In Morgoth's Ring, page 138, which is a note to section 170. It was not revealed to Manwë where the beginning of men should be. And then, this is Christopher Tolkien speaking. My father noted on the typescript that Manwë told the other Valar that he had been visited by the mind of Eru, and warned that men might not be taken living from Middle-earth. Which is a weird... I had to think about that sentence for a second. Men might not be taken living from Middle-earth. So there are so many ways you can interpret that, and I'm slightly obsessed with it, because you can interpret it as that obviously men can't be taken living from Middle-earth because they must die, sure. But that suggests two things, and the first thing is that when they do die, they are taken from Middle-earth and they go somewhere. And the second thing is that it suggests that elves can be taken living from Middle-earth and will be taken living from Middle-earth, because one day when Arda, at the end of Arda, the elves will all be alive and they will all be destroyed when Arda is, or reabsorbed back into the music of the Ainur or whatever. Which honestly sounds like an awful end, even though I still think I would prefer that over mortality. I still would prefer the immortality vibe. But it's awful. It's like, was it the Ninth Doctor who took Rose Tyler up to witness the end of Earth? And like, Rose was like, great, thanks for taking me here to this extremely depressing like gathering of people who don't really care about the Earth anymore, watching it go. I mean, I don't think anyone was actually living on Earth at the time that it was like destroyed, but that would be like watching the Earth be destroyed, knowing that as it's destroyed, so is your entire life and everything you've built over thousands of years, and you're just going to be reabsorbed up to be an endless spirit in the music of the Ainur. Like, that certainly does sound kind of like a hell, like a living hell. But like, it also suggests that all men will die before the end of the world. All men and all of their souls will be elsewhere, outside of anything that the Ainur have affected, outside of any of their music that they have created, in a place that only Iluvatar has made separately somewhere else, i.e. heaven. And even though the idea of heaven and all the depictions that we have created in like the Christian religion makes my gut kind of churn, because it sounds honestly like a kind of hell to just have constant peace. But anyway, let's not talk about that at the moment. It's just a very interesting note here that men might not be taken living from Middle-earth, and I could have completely misinterpreted that, and that is completely fine with me. I'm just here to say my thoughts. Please let me know what you think about that line if you have Morgoth's ring. If I go back to the section 170, it doesn't actually say anything more other than like the Valar did try to send forth light out to Middle-earth for the Hildi or for men, but they kind of didn't go looking for them. Whereas like, well, not that Orome was looking for the elves when he stumbled upon them. It kind of seems like it was an accident, but after that they were the Valar were very invested to get the elves back here. But this time they kind of just hid and just sent out what they could, Ulmo especially. The Hildi should be mortal and weaker than the Quendi to withstand fear and tumult. Tumult. Yeah, that's a word I don't say much out loud. So the men are weaker with regards to being able to withstand fear and tumult. I do find that really interesting, like that particular line, because why would it be that men are more likely to fear? I suppose because men are mortal. I mean, that kind of makes sense. Like, we have a lot more to lose, and I've always wanted to talk about this particular question, which I'm going to leave you with and not answer because I want to talk about it another time. What is more tragic, a man dying at age 40 or an elf dying at age 40? Anyway, I'll be back for chapter 13, which is the return of the Noldor. A very interesting chapter, and I'm very excited to read it again. I'll see you then.